She told me I wasn't needed at the dinner table, the same way she might tell me the dishwasher needed emptying. Calm. Practical, like it was just one more item on a list. It was a Sunday in late November, the kind of cold that gets into your joints before you even open the back door. My daughter had been planning this dinner for weeks. Her mother-in-law was visiting from Kelowna, the whole family coming together. Turkey and all the sides, the good china out of the cabinet. I'd spent Saturday afternoon at the Sobeys on Carling Avenue picking up an apple pie and a bottle of Ontario ice wine, things I knew her mother-in-law liked from the last time she'd visited. My daughter called me that morning. Not to say hello, she said it quickly, the way you rip off a bandage. "Dad, I just want to let you know, the table's going to be full. Vivian's family is larger than we expected, and it might be tight. Maybe just come after dinner for dessert." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and I didn't say anything for a moment. "So where do I sit?" I asked. "We'll figure something out. Maybe the kitchen island." I was 63 years old. I'd helped my daughter and her husband put the down payment on that house. I'd spent 2 weekends last spring painting their back deck while my son-in-law was at a conference in Calgary, and she was asking me to sit at the kitchen island while his mother's relatives filled my chair at her dining room table. I said, "Okay, I'll come by later." I set the phone down on the counter and looked at the apple pie sitting in its box from the bakery. I thought about calling her back. I thought about a lot of things. Instead, I put on my boots and drove to the dinner anyway. I brought the pie. I brought the ice wine. I sat at the kitchen island on a bar stool and ate reheated stuffing by myself while I could hear laughter coming from the dining room 12 feet away. My son-in-law, to his credit, came into the kitchen twice to check on me. He looked embarrassed both times. He didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. I drove home before dessert. I didn't sleep well that night. When you get to be my age, the nights you don't sleep are the ones where you replay things, not dramatically, just quietly, over and over. I kept seeing my daughter's face when she told me the table would be full. She hadn't looked uncomfortable. That was the part that stayed with me. She'd looked like she'd already decided how the evening would go and had simply been informing me of the logistics. I'd been widowed for 4 years at that point. My wife Helen had passed in the fall of 2021, and in the time since, I'd been careful not to be a burden. I'd kept my own apartment on the west end of Ottawa. I'd never asked my daughter for money, never asked her to drive me anywhere, never dropped by unannounced. We had dinner together most weeks, or we had up until the last year or so. Looking back, I can see how things had shifted. My son-in-law's mother, Vivian, had been spending more and more time in Ottawa since her husband passed. She was perfectly pleasant whenever I saw her, but gradually, without anything being formally announced, she had become the primary grandmother figure in my grandchildren's lives. She was the one they called first. She was the one my daughter called when the kids were sick. I told myself it was just geography. Vivian had recently moved to Kanata, barely 20 minutes away, while I was across town. But the dinner told me something different. About 3 weeks after that Sunday, I got a call from my bank, TD. The woman on the phone was polite but direct. There had been an application for a home equity line of credit submitted in my name against my property. I had not submitted any such application. I asked her to repeat herself. She did. The application had come in online, included a scan of my driver's license and a copy of a recent utility bill. It had been flagged because the email address used didn't match my file, and one of the security questions had been answered incorrectly on the second attempt. I sat down. My kitchen chair scraped the tile floor, and I just sat there for a moment with the phone against my ear. "How much was the application for?" I asked. $95,000, she said. I will tell you the truth, my first thought was not about money. My first thought was about who had a copy of my driver's license. Who knew my address, had been inside my home, had access to my personal documents. The list was short. I thanked the woman, wrote down the fraud case number she gave me, and told her to flag my file and freeze any new applications. She walked me through their fraud protocol. They would investigate. No funds had been dispersed. My credit had not yet been affected. She recommended I also contact Equifax and TransUnion and file a report with the Ottawa Police Service. I did all of that before noon. And then I sat with what I knew. The utility bill used in the application was from November. I had received that bill in paper. I'm old-fashioned that way, still get paper statements. And it had sat on my kitchen counter the one time my daughter had visited my apartment that month. She'd come by to drop off some of my grandchildren's drawings, which she did occasionally. Thoughtful gestures that I now saw differently. I didn't call her. Not yet. I called a lawyer. I'd used a few years back when Helen passed and we were sorting out the estate. I explained the situation. He told me to document everything, not to confront anyone directly yet, and to make sure the police report was filed properly. He also told me to review all my financial accounts immediately and look for any other unusual activity. I spent the next 2 days doing exactly that. I found nothing else had been tampered with, which was either luck or the bank had caught it early enough. I updated my passwords, set up two-factor authentication on every account, changed the PIN on my debit card. Then I waited. There's a specific kind of grief in suspecting someone you love. It's not like anger. It's more like standing in a room you've known your whole life and realizing the floor might not be solid. You step carefully. You don't run. You try to understand whether you're wrong before you commit to knowing you're right. I replayed the last year, the gradual distancing, Vivian's increasing presence, the way my daughter had seemed uncomfortable when I'd asked, once, whether she needed help with anything financially. She deflected quickly, said everything was fine, changed the subject. At the time I thought nothing of it. Now I turned it over slowly in my mind. My lawyer called back with a contact at the Ottawa Police Financial Crimes Unit. I spoke to a detective who took my statement and told me that the type of fraud I was describing, using a family member's identity and property to secure credit, was not uncommon and was taken seriously. She asked me several questions, including whether I had any idea who might have had access to my documents. I told her I had a suspicion. I told her who it was. She said they would look into it. The following week, I received a letter from the police confirming the investigation was open. The same week, I quietly met with a lawyer to update my will and, on his advice, I also removed my daughter from being listed on my investment accounts as a beneficiary, replacing her with a charitable designation while the matter was under investigation. I didn't do this out of revenge. I did it because the lawyer said that until the matter was resolved, it was the prudent thing to do. I also spoke to my building management and asked them to update who was listed as my emergency contact. I did all of this quietly. I didn't tell my daughter any of it. I still answered when she called. She called twice during that period. Brief conversations, nothing unusual. I asked about the grandchildren. She asked if I was staying warm. Normal. I was not normal on the inside. But I had learned, after 63 years, that the thing you feel and the thing you show don't have to be the same. It was a Friday evening, almost exactly 5 weeks after the bank had called me, when my daughter called and her voice was different. I knew before she said a word. There was a breathlessness to it, a compression, like she was trying to fit something very large into a very small container. "Dad," she said, "something's happened. I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay." "The police came to the house today." A pause. "They said there's an investigation. Something to do with your accounts they had questions for." She stopped. "Dad, did you file a complaint?" "I filed a fraud report," I said. "Yes." Silence. "Dad, I don't. It wasn't." She started and stopped. "Can we talk? Can I come over?" I thought about that Sunday in November, the kitchen island, the bar stool, the sound of laughter from the other room. "Not tonight," I said. "Dad, not tonight, sweetheart." I hung up and sat in my chair by the window and watched the street outside. It was cold, the same deep Ottawa cold that had been there since November, the kind that settles in for months. The streetlights were on, and a neighbor was walking a dog along the sidewalk, the dog's breath coming out in little clouds. She called 2 more times that evening. I didn't answer. She sent a text that said, "I know what you must be thinking. Please let me explain." I read it and set the phone face down. My son-in-law called the next morning. He was calmer than I expected. He asked if he could meet me for coffee, just the 2 of us. I said yes. We met at a Tim Hortons near my apartment, neutral ground, public, early enough that it wasn't crowded. He was already there when I arrived. He looked like he hadn't slept. He stood when I walked in, which struck me. He said, "I didn't know." He said it immediately, before we even sat down. "I want you to be clear on that. I didn't know anything about it." I looked at him for a moment. I believed him. We sat down with our coffees. He told me what he knew. His mother, Vivian, had been talking to my daughter for several months about a plan to buy a small income property together. A duplex somewhere in the city, something that could bring in rental income. His mother had the idea, but not enough credit on her own. My daughter had suggested that my equity could be used as a base. "Did she ask you?" he said. "Your daughter?" "No," I said. He put his hands around his coffee cup. "I didn't know the application had been submitted. I found out last night." "How much did Vivian know about how the application was being filed?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I think she understood what was being done." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I genuinely don't know what else to say." I told him I appreciated him coming. I told him I had no anger toward him. I meant it. Whatever else had happened, the man had shown up, looked me in the eye, told me the truth as he understood it, and apologized. That counted for something. We sat there a while longer. He asked what I was going to do. I told him the investigation was in the hands of the police and my lawyer at this point, and that I would not be interfering with it in either direction. He said he understood. What I didn't tell him, what I kept to myself, and still haven't said out loud to anyone, is that I'm not sure what hurts more, the fraud itself or the dinner. The application for $95,000 I didn't sign, or the bar stool at the kitchen island while his mother's relatives laughed in the next room. Both happened. One is a crime. One is just a thing a daughter did to her father, quietly, on a Sunday in November. But they feel connected. They feel like they came from the same place. My daughter and I haven't spoken properly since that Friday night. She's texted several times. I've replied to the ones about the grandchildren. I haven't replied to the others. The investigation is ongoing. My lawyer says these things move slowly. I've been told the application may have constituted fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada, depending on the intent that can be demonstrated. I don't know what that means for Vivian. I don't know what it means for my daughter. My lawyer says those determinations aren't mine to make. He's right. I went for a walk last Saturday along the Rideau River. It was one of those January days that's cold but still bright sun, the kind that doesn't give you any warmth but at least shows you the world clearly. I walked for almost 2 hours. I thought about Helen. I thought about the grandchildren. I thought about all the Sundays I'd shown up with pies and ice wine and good intentions. Somewhere along the river path, I stopped walking and just stood there for a minute. I thought, I am 63 years old. I have outlasted things I didn't think I could outlast. I will outlast this too. Then I kept walking. There's a moment, somewhere in the middle of all of it, when you realize that what's being tested isn't your patience, it's your character. I think about the Sunday in November a lot. Not with bitterness. I'm past that, mostly. But with a kind of clarity you only get after something strips away the comfortable stories you've been telling yourself. I had been telling myself that my daughter and I were close, that the distance of the last year was just life getting busy, that I was welcome. The kitchen island told me otherwise. What happened after, the fraud application, the police, the investigation, those things were serious in the legal sense. My lawyer made sure I handled them properly, but the part that required the most from me wasn't filing the report or changing my passwords or sitting across from my son-in-law at a Tim Hortons at 7 in the morning. The part that required the most was deciding again and again to act with integrity when it would have been very easy not to. It would have been easy to call my daughter the night the bank phoned me and let the conversation turn into something ugly. I didn't. It would have been easy to tell my grandchildren something that would have colored the way they saw their mother. I didn't do that either. Not because I was being noble, because I understood that whatever she had done, those children were not part of it, and they never needed to be. That line between what is mine to carry and what belongs to someone else took me a long time to learn. Helen used to say I was slow about those things. She wasn't wrong. There's something I've come to believe, not from any book or sermon, but just from having lived long enough to see patterns. The choices you make when you're hurt tell you more about yourself than the choices you make when everything is fine. Anyone can be decent when life is easy. The real question is what you do when someone you love has done something you never expected them to do. Do you burn it all down? Do you disappear into bitterness? Or do you do the hard, unglamorous work of holding yourself together, making the right calls and trusting that truth has a way of surfacing without you having to force it? I chose the slower road, and I won't pretend it felt satisfying in the moment. It didn't. Sitting alone in my apartment on that Friday night after my daughter called, not answering the phone, that wasn't triumph. That was just an old man deciding not to make things worse. But looking back, I'm glad I kept my head. I'm glad I called the lawyer before I called her. I'm glad I walked the river path and let myself feel the cold and come back with something steadier than rage. My daughter and I will have to find our way through this. I don't know yet what that looks like. I know it will take time. I know it will require things from both of us that we haven't fully reckoned with yet. What I do know is this: I am 63 years old, and I am still standing. Not because nothing has knocked me down, because I've learned slowly and at some cost how to get back up without losing the part of myself I actually want to keep. That's the only thing I'd want anyone to take from any of this, not the details. Not the fraud case, or the frozen accounts, or the bar stool at the kitchen island. Just that. You can go do something that shakes your trust in the people closest to you, and still come out the other side without becoming someone you don't recognize. It's harder than it sounds, but it's worth it.